So, a Sikh leader was recently killed in British Columbia, Canada, and Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, blames it or says there's sufficient evidence to prove that this agent was from India. He has also, or at least there's been information that there are others at risk in Canada as well. And there's basically like a feud going on between Canada and India right now. Canada is urging India to do the right thing. Whether this is true or whether they are just speculative, we're going to be checking out some updates. So let's get to it.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shocks the world by stating on the record that Canada believes India is behind the cold-blooded killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, BC on June 18th. Meantime, thousands of Sikhs in Canada tell us something we don't know. We've been surveilled, even threatened for years. That includes World Sikh Organization VP Harman Kandola, who tells us the personal side of this story, plus takes issue with our June 22nd interview about the Air India bombing.
So yesterday was an unprecedented moment for Canadian Sikhs. For the Prime Minister to rise in the House of Commons and produce and say that there's credible evidence to link the Indian government and Indian agents with the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar was something that the community has known all along. You know, this is something that right after the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar happened, the community knew that the Indian government was linked to it. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was a local Sikh activist. He was the president of the Gurdwara there. He's somebody who has been on the radar of the Indian government for speaking out against the Indian government and its terrible human rights record. When you talk about media freedoms in India, it's one of the worst nations for media freedoms. India regularly does internet blackouts in places where there's criticisms of what's happening or where they're enforcing draconian measures on organizing or protest. Canadian Sikhs want to see a public inquiry. We want to see transparency. We want to see because remember, and we'll go back to this, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was warned by Canadian intelligence that he was going to be a target. And he's not the only one. There's many others on that.
So he was warned. Does that mean he knew he was going to die that day? Wow.
That list who have been warned by Canadian intelligence that you're on a list, that your life is in danger. The day that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was assassinated, he stood up in the Gurdwara and he gave a speech that said that I know that the Indian government is trying to kill me, but I will never stop advocating for Sikhs, for Sikh human rights, and for Sikh sovereignty. That is the type of what we say, spirit that Sikhs live in. Hardeep Singh Nijjar knew that he was going to be killed by the Indian government.
Today, we learned of allegations that agents of the Indian government murdered Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian killed on Canadian soil. To all Canadians, this is my vow. I will leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of justice, including holding Narendra Modi accountable.
Jagmeet Singh has been speaking out about the Indian government from before he was an MP. He was banned, he was denied a visa to India for speaking out about its human rights records. Jagmeet Singh has been consistent on speaking out against India, and we know that the Indian government has made attempts to discredit Jagmeet Singh in this country because of his stances.
This is from an episode of Real Talk this year. This wasn't that long ago. This is back on June 22nd.
This is a small community or sub-community within the Indian Canadian community. I can't stress that enough. But for that group, they still venerate the bombers. They are still, apparently of the belief that violence justifies a political objective. And they're not afraid to present the story in their terms. I think it's safe to say that chances are more Canadians are aware of the persecution of Sikhs in India than they are of the punishment for that activity, which was meted out on Canadians.
The way that Dr. Nair frames this conversation is, the Indian government on one side and these anti-forces on the other side. The difficulty here is when she goes into speaking about the context, she doesn't provide it. And when you have the opportunity to talk about these types of issues, I think the context is really important. The Indian government went into the Sikh's most holy shrine, and they, with their army, and they absolutely desecrated and killed countless amount of innocent Sikhs. The Sikh community was absolutely enraged.
When was this?
People in British Columbia organized against the Indian government and spoke out against the government of India. And in what she says, she talks about how people like Ujjwal Dosanjh were attacked for speaking out. Well, he was.
Is this the reason for the Khalistani movement? Because there was a recent Khalistani movement that Modi did not appreciate, and he spoke to Trudeau about it, and Trudeau was fried in Canada as well. So yeah, I want to understand the whole context. If because of these occurrences, then the Khalistani movement came to the picture, and this is what they are fighting for. Feel free to, enlighten us.
Was an attack for speaking out against what the Indian government did, which is what it seems like she says. No, he was attacked for speaking out against those who were opposing the Indian government. And the relationship with the Canadian Sikh community with Ujjwal Dosanjh is a long story, and one that I think a lot of Canadian Sikhs, feel that he's worked against the interests of Canadian Sikhs. So when she talks about that there's certain people who venerate the bombers, that's absolute falsehood. There's nobody as part of the Sikh community who venerates the bombers of Air India. Every Sikh in Canada recognizes the tragedy. They want to remember the victims. But these types of false narratives that there are people who venerate the bombers. There is one Gurdwara in BC that has a photo of Talwinder Singh Parmar in it. And that is the example used by the Terry Moleskis and the Terry Glavins and the Miraners to say that here are people venerating a bomber. Absolutely not. Those people who have a photo of Talwinder Singh Parmar do not believe he was the bomber of Air India. They believe that he was set up by the Indian government to be the accused. And why do they say that? Because he is extradited to India, and before he can be tried, and before there's any type of inquiry or anything before that, he is killed extrajudicially. There is no due process. There is no trial. He's killed. For those small minority who have photos of Talwinder Singh Parmar, they look at him as a martyr who was set up by the Indian government, that in fact he had no connection and it was actually Indian agents. Even today, talking about this, when I left the house this morning, my mother told me not to.
Really?
Absolutely. She asked me where I was going. I said, I'm going to do an interview about what the Prime Minister said. She said, don't do it. I don't want you to do it. Because she knows the consequences that we face for speaking out. Everybody understands it. And finally, yesterday, the Prime Minister confirmed everything that we've been saying. And so for us, that moment of vindication, that moment that now we would be taken seriously and credible when we speak, and when Canadian Sikhs tell you that something's an issue that will be believed, that is a relief.
I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you say it. So why did you disobey your mom and show up here today?
When Hardeep Singh Nijjar knew that he was going to be killed by the Indian government, he continued to speak out. The day he was assassinated, he talked about it from stage, that no matter what happens, a Sikh will always speak out against oppression. We will always stand up for human rights. That is our duty. That is our obligation. That is our responsibility. It's something that we've done throughout our history.
Yeah, for some reason that video gave me chills just listening to it. Yeah, we've been seeing, I'm trying to understand the full context, because I've been seeing videos, it's kind of like people sharing half the story, and like we get from two different parts, where it's like from the origin, or the first time I was introduced to anything from this context was from the G20, when Trudeau was criticized because he was at India for the G20 summit, and there was a Khalistani walk in Vancouver, and I think Modi said he doesn't appreciate that, and Trudeau responded that we allow free speech in Canada. That's why the people are allowed to do what they do. That was the first time I got introduced to that. But in that clip we had seen about the Khalistani movement, I think they used the word balkanize, which meant divide India. So it felt like the cause was to divide India without full context. Like, my brain is kind of like everywhere. So there was a real cause for what they are fighting for, and the full picture wasn't given to us. I think that's what it's beginning to seem like. Otherwise, there's something I need to understand better. Yeah, I need to read that one some more, or get some more education or some more context into that video. But yeah, there you have it. Some updates. If you know about it and you want to share, feel free to do so. Otherwise, just wait for the next video when I'm armed with the knowledge. I'm gonna tell you everything. I'll give you all the gossip. It's the end of this one. Smash the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.